What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel, and hey, happy Friday. We're here today for another episode of the Dragon Empires, a 5-minute tour. Today, we're talking about that displaced elven nation, Jinin. If you guys are liking what you see, remember, be sure to like and subscribe. Today, this episode of the Dragon Empires, a 5-minute tour, was brought to you in part by Tiki Sri the Artificer, or Onru over at The Tale of Three Dragons, our Patreon game that takes place in the Dragon Empires. Thank you so much for your support, my friend. Now, let's dive in. So, a long time ago in Golarian's history, a bunch of angry, creepy fish monsters that we know as aboleths called down a giant meteor to try to kill off a bunch of humanoids. Present day on Golarion, that event is known as Earthfall, and after the devastation of Earthfall, several of the elves in Golarion chose to go back to Castrovel through the Sovereign Stone, because yeah, that's where Sovereign is, turns out. Didn't know that until kind of recently. Some of them chose to stay where they were on Golarion, but the elves of the Mirani Forest in Varizia fled into the Darklands, seeking salvation from the death and destruction that reigned above by going underground. Of course, this is the origin of Pathfinder's Drow, but it's not the case for every elf that fled to the Darklands. Upon reaching the second layer of the Darklands, Sekamina, to find their shelter, an elven oracle named Jinin experienced an overwhelming vision of a silver tree. She knew that salvation for her people could be found by seeking the roots of that tree and following them up. She knew that where they emerged, they would find a new land where they could start their lives again. Of course, the majority of the elves believed going down, not up, and this resulted in a painful schism when Jinin and several hundred of her closest friends were forced to depart from the main elven host, even denied a fair share of the food and supplies by increasingly covetous elves who wished to seek shelter even deeper and eventually would worship demons and become drow. But Jinin and her generation never would learn of that dire fate. Instead, they set out to wander the labyrinthine and seemingly endless tunnels of Sekamina for hundreds of years, taking their steps slowly and cautiously because the Darklands are definitely a 100% very dangerous place, just ask my players. Often they would stop to hole up in a cavern simply to outlive larger settlements of monsters and creatures that they would find blocking their way. Eventually, they came upon a shockingly vast lode of mithril that resembled nothing so much as the immense roots of a silver tree. Following the mithril veins upward, the elves emerged, after centuries, into a new land, that new land being the heart of Tian Sha. Jinin died a few weeks later, content that her vision had led her kin to safety, and they named the idyllic forest realm they now found themselves in after her. The nation of Jinin has remained one of Tian Sha's oldest and most mysterious kingdoms ever since. Present day, the elves of Jinin have adopted the lifestyle of honor and duty that bind the samurai of Minkai, inspired by Tianmin visitors 1,000 years before. These tales, of course, would eventually inspire the Sun Shogun Shokuro to travel to central Tian Sha and found the nation that is in fact named after him. They're more ordered and respectful of tradition than are the elves of the distant west, and upon learning of the fate that eventually transformed their kin into the Drow, they've only further embraced the virtues of law and personal honor so as to not share that dire fate. They guard well the secret entrance to the mithril roots, these caverns where they carefully mine just enough mithril to keep their people in comfort via trade. Visitors to Jinin, like in much elven kingdoms, are of course respectfully welcomed, but they're not encouraged to linger. And yeah, like all places on Golarion, there's definitely a real world equivalent here. Here, it's more of the notion of if you dig down enough living in the west, eventually you come to the east, except, that's actually feasible and you don't hit the core of the earth and die a miserable death alone. Also, what would a fantasy setting be without elves, right? When I think the Dragon Empires, of course, I think Kitsune, Samsarans, Wyangs, Nagaji, things of that nature. I don't often think of elves, but it's fantasy. They're there. And if I were to GM in the Dragon Empires, I would definitely point that out to my players who might be a little new to the concept of a Far East setting. but familiar with fantasy, you don't necessarily have to play a race you don't want to play. Though, really, I personally am totally okay with anyone playing whatever, whenever. It's all in the name of fun, right? But if you're the kind of GM who needs the race to fit the setting, Jinin means we can definitely have elves in our Far East campaigns. And if I were to play a character from Jinin, really, I'm not sure if I'd ever necessarily want to leave mithril everywhere, a passage to the Darklands that needs guarding. It's very, very stereotypically elven in the Tolkien sense, except, not the classic CG that we see across the world. Here we're samurai, because we want to not be a drow so bad. We've left everything behind and embraced personal honor. I need to find a way to get honor over to Jinin, it turns out, in 3 Dragons, but that's a spoiler for 3 Dragons that I've literally just dreamed up, and we're gonna have to work it in somehow, I guess. What do you guys think about Jinin? Have you ever adventured here? Have you played a TN elf? And how do we feel about this taste of classic fantasy here in our Far Eastern tales? Let me know in the comments below, and hey, if you throw a request in there, it will definitely be very close, if not immediately, at the top of the list. But thank you guys so much for watching, and again, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. The next episode of the Dragon Empires, a 5-minute tour, drops next Friday.